Welcome back to another edition of Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. With me, I'm Ken Warren. With me, Bruce Scariok, and special guest, Lisa Wallace of Canadian Press. If you're wondering where Don is, he continues to fill out his football fantasy in the NFL playoffs. But here we're going to talk about the weekend that was for the Ottawa Senators, a Father's Day trip, a lot of bonding with dads. And they came back splitting games in Carolina, St. Louis, a tough road trip. Lisa, we'll look at you. What did you think of that road trip and how they managed?
Well, I think you have to take some points for the fact that they won in Carolina, and which is such a rarity. So was it maybe some of the magic from having the fathers along the trip and just maybe loosened things up and made them forget how tough it is for them to win? I mean, it's a big 2 points for this team who, let's face it, I don't think anyone wants to be bottom of the basement come the end of the season, so any 2 points is good. It was a solid enough game in St. Louis. So overall, if you look at the road trip, I think there's a lot to be positive if you can. Just, Craig Anderson comes back, which was big, and Thomas Shabbat looks good. So, at least you're getting some healthy bodies back in the lineup.
Well, and I think one of the things they did in Carolina was they played well, and I think they played well in St. Louis, and they're a controversial call away from maybe at least getting a point out of that game, and maybe two. One of the things that they did in Carolina Friday night, I think, was they played well from start to finish, and they also got good goaltending from Anders Nielsen, and that to me made a big difference for them. And I think people wondered what Craig Anderson would look like in his first game back, and I thought that he looked pretty good. So all in all, they can look at it as a successful trip. Obviously, they would have liked to have gotten another point or two out of St. Louis, but they're a controversial call away from that happening as well.
Yeah, it's in St. Louis after that, and both Craig Anderson and Guy Boucher very livid at whether he'd frozen the puck or not. I think 9 times out of 10 you get that call that it's a frozen puck. Again, it's a referee on the wrong side of the net. It is a controversy.
Well, and one of the things you often see on those calls, the referee, it gets blown down because the referee says he intended to blow the whistle, and Lisa, they didn't even get that break.
That's the weird one. Is normally, if you don't have sight of it, it's supposed to be, regardless whether it's blown out, it's in my mind I was going to blow the whistle, exactly. Which I find sometimes a bit of a weird call. But the fact that it didn't go their way kind of surprised me. So you kind of go, okay, well, maybe we deserved at least a point out of that game, but it is what it is. At some point, I'm sure, down the road, maybe they do catch a break going the other way.
Yeah, you mentioned it, Bruce, about Craig Anderson looked good. I thought he was a little bit rusty at the start of that game, but I think he hadn't played in a month, so I think that's understandable. He got into his game. He was very good in the second period of that game. The other thing that happened, during that game is there was the rumblings of a contract offer to Matt Duchene. I mean, we've been waiting for this, expecting this. Now we can talk about whether that 8 years, $64 million is the figure out there. There's going to be more negotiating. Where do we go from here, Bruce?
Well, one of the things they can't do is at some point here they've got to force Matt Duchene to make a decision, and they can't allow he or his agent to drag their feet on this issue. They need an answer, and they need an answer soon. They need an answer before the February 25th trade deadline, Lisa, and they need an answer well before the February 25th trade deadline, because they've got to look at the situation and decide whether they're going to trade this guy or not. Did they table a formal offer? I think they discussed generalities. I certainly believe the $64 million was discussed. I'm not sure that it was in the form of a formal offer. I think they discussed parameters and where they want these contract talks to go. I think they discussed the timing of these contract talks. But if you look at the history of Pat Brisson on the John Tavares negotiation, he dragged his feet, and Tavares got traded. Tavares signed with the Leafs as an unrestricted free agent, and he never got traded. The Senators can't have that scenario of Matt Duchene. At some point, Lisa, Matt Duchene has to say whether he wants to stay or wants to go.
Well, I don't even know if it's really up to Matt Duchene. To me, it's that I think the Senators need to come up with a date in mind and say, if we don't have an agreement by this point, then we need to decide. Because I think the later, if you go into, let's say, February 20th and you don't have something, you have no leverage anymore as the general manager to make a trade, because everyone knows you don't have a deal. You need to get rid of this guy because you don't want to end up giving him away for nothing. So your timeline. So if I'm Pierre Dorion and the Senators, I'm going, what's the date? Is it February 10th? Is it February 15th? Is 10 days enough for them to come up with a trade that's going to give them enough back to make you feel, well, like, okay, well, we didn't lose them for anything.
Well, and it may even be earlier than that. I mean, we're going to go to the All-Star break here, and it's not just Matt Duchene. You also got Mark Stone, and you got Ryan Dzingel. You're going to go to this All-Star break and bye week in 10 days. I'm not sure that there isn't going to be a change during this break. If you go and you move bodies out, come back, and the team looks a little bit different even after the break.
I don't think Mark Stone's going anywhere. I think he's going to sign a contract. I've said what I've said about Ryan Dzingel, so I'm not going there anymore.
I think we all think he's going to get traded.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's just a matter of when kind of thing.
And so, but I think that Stone is going to stay. Do we see it trade in the next 9-10 days? Sure, we could. I mean, I don't know, maybe what always happens on the trade market is somebody likes to jump out early and get ahead of the pack. And obviously the Pittsburgh Penguins have always been a team that has approached it at that route. They're a possibility. Maybe the Columbus Blue Jackets want to do something quickly. There's a bit of an arms race in the Eastern Conference right now. Sure, we could see a trade in the next 10 days before they go back and play the Pittsburgh Penguins on February 1st. Absolutely.
We'll throw this out. Ryan Dzingel has a Columbus connection. He went to OSU. There might be something there, perhaps.
And haven't they scouted the Columbus has been at their last two games?
So, I wouldn't be surprised. They need a little bit of offense there. Speaking of All-Star and, what might happen, I mean, Ottawa's going to be represented by Thomas Shabbat. He's come back from his shoulder injury. He hasn't looked like he's missed a beat. That's a positive. We don't know what the future is going to lie with a lot of these unrestricted free agents. What we do know is that Thomas Shabbat is going to be a part of this team for a while, and he looks as good as he did before the injury.
Yeah, he doesn't look at all as if, the injury kind of derailed him in any way. But at the same point, being that it was the shoulder, probably got in as much skating as he could, so your conditioning didn't get sidetracked whatsoever. And I think for him, that's a big part, that you need to keep your legs moving. So I think you look at that, but then it ends up being, what happens on that blue line right now? There's a lot of bodies, and I think they need to decide sort of, who are we moving forward with? So you have to wonder, is Cody Ceci going to be still back with this team after, All-Star break or by February 25th? That's a name that, to me, I think more than likely I could see them moving, because they need to make a decision. Is he part of your future or is he not?
Right. Well, and I made this point before, Lisa. They took him to arbitration, and I always think when you take a player to arbitration, I'm not sure that what says what you think. I'm not sure that says what you think about the player, and because arbitration can be very adversarial, and I'm sure there were a lot of negative things said about Cody.
Said when he came out, it wasn't a pleasant experience.
That's right. There's a lot of you find out everything the organization thinks of you, and usually it's not very good. And I look at that situation. Teams are calling. Teams that want defensive help are calling. I don't think it's so much about what Cody Ceci is making. It's what he's making for the role he plays on this team, and what he's going to make down the road, and where he's going to be. So I could see them deciding that, maybe Cody Ceci needs a change of scenario.
Well, on another team, he's not going to be logging, the first pairing kind of minutes. And another team that's making a playoff run, it might be as a second pair, even a third pair defense. So you're going to be, maybe that's a better role suited for his abilities. One more game before the All-Star break. It's the Arizona Coyotes coming in. Obviously, the Senators want to go out on a good note if they can. It's interesting. I would assume Craig Anderson would start. We talked about Anderson going in the break. The last time they played the Coyotes, I was there. It was in Halloween. Was the Mike Condon night. We have not seen Mike Condon since. The hip injuries, the mental problems he was going through. Again, Craig Anderson's name is sort of out there in the trade rumor, but I just can't see a team picking him up. Anyway, beyond Craig Anderson, what do you want to see here in this last game for the Senators going the break? What do they have to show?
I think they just have to, they can't look forward. They can't look past and just be thinking about the break. I think we saw that heading into Christmas. There was a bit of a lull, and so you just need to finish strong. And, there's guys who they keep talking about, we still believe in ourselves now. Can they at least move up the standings a bit? I think that's the thing. You just don't want to be bottom dwellers, and so every point counts, and you need to pick up points against teams like Arizona.
I want to see progression. That's the buzzword. I want to see progression.
Well, on that note, maybe we should wrap up this week's edition. We won't be back next week because of the bye week. Thanks to Lisa. Thanks to Bruce. Take care. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care.